She never helps with anything. You know that, right? My brother said it loud enough for the whole table to hear, and everyone just kept eating. My aunt nodded. My uncle refilled his glass. My mother looked down at her plate like she'd suddenly found the mashed potatoes very interesting. I sat there with my fork halfway to my mouth and thought, okay, let's do this. Because what nobody at that table knew, not my brother, not my aunt, not a single person holding a wine glass under my parents' roof that night, was that for the past 2 years I had been quietly, methodically, paying the bill that kept that house standing. The house on Clearwater Lane always looked like something out of a catalog. My mother made sure of it. Fresh flowers on the entryway table every week. A wreath on the door that changed with the seasons. Windows so clean they almost looked fake. Growing up, I used to think it meant we were doing well. Turns out it just meant my mother was very good at presentation. My brother is 3 years older than me, and from the time we were kids, he had a way of filling a room. Loud laugh, big personality, the kind of guy who remembers every sports score but forgets every favor anyone ever did for him. My parents loved that about him. They called it confidence. I called it selective memory. I was the quiet one. I worked hard, kept my head down, got a job in healthcare administration straight out of college. Nothing glamorous. Billing and insurance logistics for a mid-size hospital network. But I was good at it. Methodical. I understood numbers, deadlines, fine print. I understood how much things actually cost. My brother became a contractor. Not a bad living when work is steady. The problem is work isn't always steady. Thanksgiving dinner was the first time I'd sat at that table in almost 8 months. I'd been busy, genuinely busy. Not the kind of busy that's really just avoidance, though there'd been some of that too. I drove the 3 hours from my apartment, brought a good bottle of wine and a pie I'd made from scratch, and walked in telling myself it was just going to be a normal dinner. It almost was. My aunt and uncle were there, my mother's side. My cousin had come with her husband. My brother was there with his girlfriend, a woman named, I want to say Tiffany, but I'm honestly not sure she ever introduced herself directly to me. My parents were in the kitchen doing what they always did, which was moving around each other in practiced silence. The conversation was fine at first. Football. Someone's new job. My cousin's baby, who was 8 months old and apparently the most fascinating creature to ever exist. I smiled when I was supposed to, answered questions when they came my way, poured myself a second glass of wine and started to relax. Then my brother got going. It started small. A comment here, a joke there. He was talking about the house, actually, about some repairs my dad had been putting off, and how he'd helped install new gutters in October. Which, fine. He did help with that. I know because my mother texted me pictures of him on a ladder like he'd just completed a military mission. Someone's got to take care of things, he said, and laughed. My dad laughed too. And then my brother, I still don't know if he planned it or if it just rolled out of him the way careless things do, leaned back in his chair, gestured toward me, and said, "She never helps with anything. You know that, right? I don't think she's picked up a hammer in her life." There was a beat, a half-second where it could have gone anywhere. And then my uncle laughed first, and after that it was easy for everyone else to follow. My mother made a small sound that wasn't quite a laugh and wasn't quite a correction. My cousin looked at her plate. My brother's girlfriend smiled, the way people smile when they're not sure what's funny, but want to seem like they belong. I put my fork down. I didn't say anything. I picked my fork back up, and I finished my food, and I talked about the baby, and I helped clear the table, and I drove 3 hours home in the dark. But something had shifted. Not broken, shifted. Like something that had been held at an angle for a long time finally finding its level. I should tell you how it started. The real story, the part nobody at that table had any idea about. It was 26 months before that dinner. Late February, which in the part of the Midwest I grew up in, means gray skies and the kind of cold that gets into your bones no matter how many layers you have on. I was at my apartment, a Tuesday night, making soup, I think, when my dad called. He never called. My mother was the one who called. My dad communicated mainly through forwarded news articles and the occasional voicemail that started with, "Hey, it's Dad," like I might not recognize his voice after 29 years. I knew before I picked up that something was wrong. He talked for a long time before he got to the point. About the business, about a big contract that had fallen through, about a partner who'd left under circumstances he didn't officially explain. I listened, I stirred my soup, I waited, then he said it. "We're behind on the mortgage." More than I realized. He'd been managing it, that was the phrase he used, managing it, for about 8 months. Dipping into savings, making partial payments, shuffling things around. But they were out of road. If they missed the next payment, they'd be at risk of foreclosure proceedings beginning. "How much?" I asked. He told me. The number was $2,600 a month. Not astronomical, not by certain standards, but it was a significant chunk of what I made, and it was going to mean restructuring, basically everything about how I lived. I did the math in my head while he was still talking. Cut the gym membership, stop ordering groceries from the nice store, pick up the extra weekend shift I'd been turning down for a year. "Don't tell your mother," he said. "She doesn't know how bad it is. It would really hurt her." "I want to tell you," I pushed back. That I said, "Dad, she has a right to know. This is her house too. You need to be honest with her." I have replayed this conversation 1,000 times imagining myself saying that. But what I actually said was, "Okay, how do we do this?" he cried. Not loudly, not for long. My father isn't that kind of man. But I heard it, and it was the sound of someone who had been holding something very heavy for a very long time. So I said okay, and we figured out the logistics, and I set up the transfer for the first of the following month. I told myself it was 6 months, maybe 8, just until he got things stabilized. 8 months became 12. 12 became 18. The business didn't fully recover. My dad picked up some smaller contracts, made some progress, but he was also getting older and slower to adapt, and the industry had changed. My mother never found out. She kept the house beautiful and hosted Christmas and talked about how hard my dad had worked his whole life. And I wired $2,600 every single month like clockwork and never said a word. My brother, during this same period, borrowed $4,000 from my parents. I know because my dad told me, apologetically, like he was embarrassed. Said my brother had a slow quarter and needed to bridge a gap. I said that was fine and I meant it. People need help, but I also noticed the next time I came home that my brother had a new truck. I noticed a lot of things during those 2 years. Little things that wouldn't have meant much individually, but that added up when you were keeping the kind of careful running tally I was keeping. The way my mother referred to me as independent, in a tone that meant distant. The way my brother got credit for the gutters and the weekend he spent helping my dad clean out the garage, while I was. Apparently, according to the general narrative, the sibling who didn't pitch in, I didn't set them straight. I told myself it wasn't about credit. I told myself it was about family, about love, about doing what you can even when it costs you. But I also saved every bank statement, every single one. Not out of anger, not at first, just because I'm the kind of person who keeps records. It's literally my job to keep records. I keep records the way other people keep grudges, automatically, without drama, just slipping them into a folder in the back of a filing cabinet and closing the drawer. 24 statements. Sitting in a manila folder in my apartment. $62,400. I want to be honest about what happened after Thanksgiving. I was not immediately calm and clear-eyed. I cried in my car before I even got to the highway. Not pretty crying, the ugly kind, with bad sounds and your face doing things you'd be embarrassed for anyone to witness. I was angry and I was tired and I was, if I'm being completely honest, a little ashamed. Not of what I'd done, but of how long I'd let the other story exist without challenging it. I'm the one who never helps. Okay, fine. The next morning I made coffee and I sat at my kitchen table and I opened my laptop and I looked at the most recent transfer, the one that had gone through on the 1st of November, like every other one had for the past 24 months. And I thought, am I going to do this again in December? And something in me went very quiet and very still. And the answer that came back was, no, I didn't cancel it that morning. I sat with the decision for 3 days. which I think is the right amount of time to sit with a decision that's going to change something real. I thought about my parents. I thought about the house. I thought about the difference between abandoning someone and stopping a pattern that was hurting you. I thought about it from every angle I could think of. On the fourth day, I canceled the automatic transfer. I didn't send a message. I didn't call. I just canceled it, closed my laptop, and went to work. My dad called me on the 3rd of December. I let it go to voicemail. Then I listened to the voicemail standing in the parking garage at work, and it was not what I expected. He didn't ask about the transfer directly. He said he'd noticed something and he wanted to talk. He said he hoped I was doing okay. He said he loved me, which was not something he said often or without occasion. I sat in my car for a long time after that. Then I called him back. I told him I wasn't going to make the payment in December or after. I said I needed him to understand that I had been doing this for 24 months and that it had cost me a significant amount of money that I needed to start redirecting toward my own life. I said I wasn't angry at him, and that was true. I wasn't angry at my dad. I was something more complicated than angry, something that doesn't have a clean name. He was quiet for a long time. "I know," he finally said. "I know it wasn't fair." "It wasn't," I said. "But that's not the main thing right now. The main thing is that it needs to stop, and you need to figure out what comes next. And Mom needs to know the whole picture." Another long silence. "She's going to be devastated," he said. "She's going to be okay," I said. "She's tougher than you think. You both are." We got off the phone. I sat in that parking garage for another 15 minutes before I could make myself drive. Christmas was the next time I saw everyone. My mother called me the week before to tell me that things were a little complicated right now and that she hoped I would still come. Her voice was careful in a way I wasn't used to from her, like she was holding her words up to the light before she let them out. I said I'd be there. I brought wine again, pie again. Same road, same dark, same house with the seasonal wreath on the door. But this time when I walked in, my mother hugged me differently, longer, and without the vague quality the hugs usually had, like contact was being made, but nobody was really present for it. She held on, and when she pulled back, her eyes were very bright, and she said, "I owe you a real conversation." "I know," I said. My brother was already there. He was in the living room watching something on TV, and when I came in he looked up, and I watched something move across his face that I didn't quite have a name for. Not guilt exactly, something more like the early stages of guilt before it's fully formed. "Hey," he said. "Hey," I said. Dinner was quieter than Thanksgiving. There were fewer people. My mother had, I think, deliberately kept it small. My aunt and uncle weren't there. It was just the four of us at the kitchen table instead of the formal dining room, and the food was simpler. Roast chicken, green beans, bread from the bakery around the corner. My dad carved the chicken without saying much. My mother kept getting up and sitting back down. My brother ate steadily and didn't make jokes. It was my brother who said something first, which surprised me. We were clearing plates when he stopped in the middle of the kitchen and said, "I didn't know." I looked at him. "About any of it," he said. "Dad told me. And I didn't know." There's a version of that moment where I said something elegant, something with exactly the right balance of dignity and compassion, a line that would land cleanly and move things forward. I've thought about it a lot. What I actually said was, "I know you didn't." Because I believed him, whatever his flaws, and he has them the same way I have mine. I did believe that he hadn't known, and I think that mattered to say out loud. He nodded. He put the plates in the sink. He was quiet for the rest of the night, which for him is remarkable. My mother and I talked after dinner, sitting at the kitchen table with decaf and the last of the pie, while my dad and brother watched TV in the other room. She had found out sometime in the first week of December, when my dad finally told her. She said she'd cried for 2 days. Not because of the money, she was careful to clarify, or not only because of the money, but because of the picture it painted. 2 years of her not knowing. 2 years of her daughter carrying something that heavy and never saying a word. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked. I thought about it. "Because Dad asked me not to," I said, "and because I thought it was something I could carry. You shouldn't have had to carry it alone. No, I said. I shouldn't have. She looked at her coffee cup. What your brother said at Thanksgiving, that was wrong. I should have said something in the moment. You didn't know, I said. I should have said something anyway. She was right. And I think she knew. I knew she was right, so neither of us felt the need to elaborate on it. We talked for a long time that night. About the house, which they were planning to sell in the spring. My dad's decision, and I think the right one, even though it was painful. About what came next. About patterns that had been running so long they'd started to look like just the way things were. I told her I wasn't looking for an apology from my brother. What I wanted was for him to understand what contribution actually costs, not in a punitive way, but in a real one. I told her I didn't need him to grovel, I needed him to grow. She said she'd talked to him about it already, that he'd listened, that he was going to pay our parents back the $4,000 he'd borrowed, starting in January. I said that sounded right. There is a particular kind of free I felt driving home from Christmas that I hadn't felt in a long time. Not euphoric, not that. More like the feeling after a long fever breaks. Like your body finally gets to start using its energy for normal things again, instead of fighting something. I had a lot of thinking to do about my own finances. 24 months of $2,600 is real money. Not catastrophic, not gone in a sense I couldn't recover from, but real. I built a new budget. I started a savings plan I should have started years ago. I picked up one permanent additional shift per month, which adds up more than you'd think over the course of a year. The house sold in April, like my parents had planned. A young couple bought it. I saw the listing online, the pictures with someone else's furniture in the rooms I grew up in. I let myself look at it once and then I closed the tab. My parents bought a condo on the other side of town. Smaller, obviously, single floor. My dad said the maintenance was a fraction of what the house required. My mother said she liked being able to see the neighbors, which surprised me. She was always so private. But I think maybe that was part of the point. Less performance, more contact. She texted me a picture of their new kitchen on the first morning they slept there. Just morning light on a counter and 2 coffee mugs and a note that said, "Feels like a fresh start." I stared at it for a long time in a good way. My brother and I are not what I would call close. Not yet. Maybe not ever in the way people describe siblings who are best friends. But something changed. He called me in February, not for any particular occasion, just to call. We talked for maybe 20 minutes about nothing much. His work, my work, a podcast he'd been listening to. It was the ordinary conversation we'd had in years, and that ordinariness was the whole point. Near the end, he said, "I've been thinking about what Dad said, about everything you were doing." I waited. "I don't really have the words for it," he said. "That's okay," I said. "I'm sorry about what I said at Thanksgiving." I let that sit for a second, not to make him uncomfortable, just to let it be real. "Thank you," I said. "I know you meant it. I think that was the right amount. Not forgiveness as performance, not a list of conditions, not a long speech about everything I'd held on to. Just, I hear you, and I think I do. I still think about the night of that Thanksgiving dinner. Not with the same sharpness as before. The sharpness has gone somewhere, not all the way away, but far enough that it doesn't catch me off guard anymore. I think about sitting there with my fork halfway to my mouth and feeling the laughter ripple around the table and not saying a word. I used to think my silence was a failure, something I should be ashamed of. Now I understand it differently. Silence can be a lot of things. It can be weakness, sure. I've been that kind of quiet too. But it can also be a woman who already knows what she knows, holding it close until she decides exactly what to do with it. I wasn't passive at that table. I was patient. And now, on the other side of all of it, I have a real budget, a smaller but more honest relationship with my family, and the particular quiet of a life that belongs entirely to me. Contribution isn't what you announce at the table. It's what you do when no one's looking, and it's also, and this took me a long time to understand, knowing when to stop doing it for people who've forgotten to look. My worth was never on the table. I just stopped letting them act like it was.